Hello? Doing that.
Here's there. One. Whether.
Well, now. Hoo hoo. Do your hoo hoo thing. Okay. Hoo hoo. Come on, Al.
Yeah. Let me ask her real quick. For EM50, wasn't it? I'm on the phone, Sean.
What do you mean?
I'm on the phone with Sean.
Yeah,
We gave a card to Ian for 50.
$100. We gave him $100.
He did.
And we drove there. Hoo hoo hoo. Why are you not working, Al? Be set up. There you go. Maybe.
Yeah, the thing. The thing, Mike. Just went off. Right there on the left.
That's volume. So maybe, but it's not, it usually goes hoo hoo and then
Well, it says on.
follows you around, so.
It's okay. It says on and okay.
Yeah, that's just, the meeting's being recorded. I don't think I have to say okay. But we'll see.
Long torso, so she already has long, torso. How much she already got?
Anybody else on besides that?
Yeah, she's able to see.
The difference.
We're
back.
So you're on that side.
And he was free.
It's been following them.
And in another week or two, they don't. You got nothing going on there. It's not like you're meeting. It's like if you everything now. Yeah, she has extra keys in there. Oh, the first. Back.
It's been okay.
So change extra keys.
Oh, there's plenty.
Regards. I've had a ton of sports.
I like it.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, so, yeah, and I heard it was good, I'll take them and put them into the
I was going to the race, and they moved the chair like.
They went back from
last year with,
So that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had two.
So far, I need to-
Brand new.
You was my. You was my.
My bill.
Cause I was like, I couldn't go, but then I could do it, it's just, it was really. Really good.
Yeah.
I ended up, sitting down today, and medium male.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's strong. That's strong. Did you get that from
I think.
I've helped her a long time.
You know, like all other.
Yesterday. There you go. Oh, yeah, the thing that you, yeah. It's against the. Yes.
well,
And then.
yeah, so I checked my head. And.
What? This year 20?
Feel like going far and grab that one off the wall. I like because I have, I know. Two of those chairs right here. Right. She gets some. How we doing? Here, the gorgeous day. I don't know, I think we got a lot of students. We came in a while ago where because there's clean ups, they're gonna, and when they, and right before they emerge, the rest might start.
Yeah, my brother asked me that.
The BSC, they like. I gotta get some keys.
And that's the time that.
I'm like supposed to break it and then. And I was really through it. Okay.
Well, you guys, it does.
I was. Well, to thank you. It is great. Rob, thanks for helping. He helped me on Monday. Joe drives over. I canceled on Sunday, but Joe was coming from campaign. Was halfway here when he let me know he was coming, so it's kind of. But the weather was basically okay, so, we got through all the hives, the girls are playing their old tricks again still. A lot of them look new, some are big and some are, and yeah, and there was a swarm that hung there for 3 days, 30 foot up teasing me. And it was cold and rainy and it's kind of like girls,
I had a swarm too.
yeah, yeah, raise your hand if you've had a swarm. You're not alone.
What?
Some I caught, some have gone in the swarm trap, some I said, have fun, girl.
No, they aren't even going to the swarm trap.
I've gotten 3 in the swarm traps. I put some in, but it's interesting, one of the swarm traps and 2 that I put in boxes were swarms with no queen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of like, okay, girls, what are you doing? So, so again, you are not alone, and there's a table behind you, not alone. Okay, this coming week, we're gonna be Friday. Bees and Brews is coming up, and we are at, Lake Road, this one at Lake Road?
Nope.
No,
Nope.
no,
That's a G's.
Papa G's, okay, Papa G's, that's right.
It's in the email.
Okay, it's Papa G's, he's a beekeeper, so let's support him. It is an outdoor event, their seating is outdoor, but they have like pizza and beer and stuff, and it's,
If it
And-
rains, we'll be across the street.
yeah, so we've got a place, we got a backup plan. So, but again, Steve is a beekeeper himself, actually, his dad is part of the ISBA.
He's the
board.
president.
No, he's the president now,
Used to be the secretary.
yeah,
He shuffles around.
yeah.
Did he get elected?
Probably, it's one of those, once you say yes, you're elected for life.
Ah,
Ah, that's,
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
we always welcome other, Rob's now on the board and kind of joining us, and helping us. And again, our board is pretty laid back, I'll say. What we're doing is just trying to get some ideas on, where you want to go, what you want to do. We're not, if this is your organization, how can we support you is what we want to do with that. So yeah, Papa G's, let's see, what else do I want to tell you? Oh, the end of June, whatever the last Saturday is, I think that's the 28th.
28.
Okay, one of our bee inspectors, Jim Wellwood, will be at our club hives, like a 2 to 4 range, showing, again, what an inspection going through the club hives, and I'm not telling him he can go through any of the hives he wants to. And then after that, we are going to have a campfire and some mead and some light snacks, make it a little bit more social within that. So, bring any mead that you want to taste. We'll have some meads, we'll have some s'mores.
Bring a chair.
Yeah, so a lawn chair or something, and we got plenty of wood that we can burn it all night if you want to. Alright, so, and, s'mores, and I've got the little roasting sticks and all that kind of stuff. I think it is 28th, is that? 28th.
Saturday, well, it says in the thing,
28.
Saturday, July 26th. His hands
I
on.
think it's 2.
I think it's.
Mine don't say June 28. 2 to 4.
It's on Saturday, 28th.
What's,
Okay.
I will double
It's
check.
supposed to be
It's the
June
last Saturday.
28th on Saturday at 2 o'clock.
Yeah,
Okay, July 26th is honey harvesting.
yeah, okay, that's okay, so the extraction of that is in July. Phew, I didn't make a mistake, good, cause I can do that, can't I?
Keep things going.
Yeah, so Jim will be there, and again, this is a good opportunity, you want to meet him, see what he does, cause sometimes you see him, sometimes he does, you don't see him. And again, he is our friend, he's not like the policeman that followed me this morning and that I thought I was gonna get a ticket for, but didn't.
Do we have this other half coming?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
We'll reach out, we're hoping to get the new inspector with us, again, so again, cause all the inspectors have different style. Arvin from, Springfield had a very different style, so again, you're just like with the rest of us speaks, they're different too. So they do follow some guidelines they have from the state, they have to follow. But again, it's a chance to meet him, chance to see what he does, chance to be social and, kick back and bring some meat around. Or if you want beer, or if you want 7-Up, you can do that. Okay?
Yep.
Okay.
You gotta mention that, basically what was Jim's territory is split up.
It's,
Like,
I don't think they've officially announced it yet. have they?
I saw a
they
map.
got it on the map.
Yeah, it seems, 51 seems to be a dividing line, but it's weird, Jim lives west of it, but does the east side. You know, so
That was
some,
in
yeah,
Gridley's east of 51.
okay, well, anyhow,
He's more east than it. And, is that the name?
no,
Amber.
Amber,
Amber. I knew it was an A.
yeah, it was an A.
Either way, if you call
Yeah.
it, we'll get you connected.
Yeah, okay, so we'll get you, and again, there's a new map out there, so you can know who's in your territory. And you too could become a inspector possibly, because Amber actually took the class from us, so we. Anything else I need to add? Well, what books do you have from the library?
Well, what I try to do is I try to go through these books and for what we have, there's 3 books here I brought just for somebody who's curious, they have to be very careful. This is a bee book dated
1861.
1861.
Yeah, so beekeeping has been around and, you know, some of it's good, you know,
Yeah,
and stuff, so.
Yeah, I think this is our oldest one,
Okay,
but it has, it's funny because I went through it just a little bit and the language is different. It's kind of neat, but you know, reading it.
what do you expect from a Civil Era book?
What? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's a century old, yeah, I wanna see you, Tyler, when you're a century old.
You know what bees do, what bees do.
Yeah, they've been
Just like
doing
they
it,
did back
they've been doing it for eons, a lot longer than we have. All right, anything else?
They're not native, even though they've been here over 400 years, but.
Yeah. They technically, yeah, it's,
I don't know when you become native, but evidently it's not 400 years.
yeah, so,
There is, it's came over on the boat.
yeah, they came over on the boat. All right, so any other questions or comments or more questions or ideas or things like that? Okay,
Okay, so we're gonna we had to switch around our topics, we had a speaker cancel, so we're gonna do Varroa earlier. Which I think is a really good thing, so that you're prepared way earlier, so that you can take actions now to have stuff and then have, well, actually, I see some people, Ken, did you bring your vape? No, right, but Team Shiver Decker's got theirs, so, we are gonna bring it, I didn't bring mine because I figured you guys would, but, brought some stuff to kind of show and tell. Did we bring the kit?
no, I did
No,
that,
no worries, but we can show some pictures of that, we'll walk through it online.
okay.
So I have a PowerPoint here, it's the same one we went through last year. How many people heard it last year? Okay, good, so that doesn't mean you don't get to hear it again, but, cause there's some slides we're gonna do. I'm not gonna read it to you, so instead what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna double check from Arthur that he's cool that I share this. But I'll put it up on the Facebook page, or at least take excerpts out of it and put it on the Facebook page for everybody. What's important is to understand the life cycle of mites. And then, once you understand, the reason why it's important to understand the life cycle of mites is because that'll help you understand what treatments and how those treatments are effective or not effective in certain circumstances. So there's no one treatment that works all the time. So we'll go ahead and dig into this. So, history. I'm not sure I'm gonna skip through that. The life cycle, all right, so this is, you wanna take a picture of this, that's cool too. This is really, 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 really important. Okay, so then because of that, I'm gonna read part of this. So the female mite enters the cell of the developing larva, so just before it's capped. Moves underneath the larva and into the bee food in the bottom of the cell. Once food's gone, within 60 hours of being capped, moves onto the pupa and begins to lay eggs. So 60 hours of being capped. One cell is capped, mite begins feeding on pupa. Female lays 5 eggs within 60 hours of the cell being capped. You see how this escalates quickly, right? 6 in drone cells, because they get that extra time, right? 1 is male, the first one laid, the other 4 or 5 are females. Mites feed on the pupa until reaching sexual maturity in 5 to 8 days. Male mates with 4 females. When bee emerges, 5 mated females are attached and spread throughout the colonies. So hopefully that kind of helps you understand how quickly this escalates. So how many bees are on a deep frame?
About 6,000.
I heard 6,000 to 7,000. Give or take how bad you're honeybound right now, right? So multiply that times how many frames you got with brood. So if you got 5 to 6 mites coming out of 6,000 cells. Right, and right now your colony is building, right? So we're gonna pull up the Randy Oliver chart in a little bit and kind of see how how and why your hive crashes if you don't take action.
How long do the grower mites live after they hatch? So like when you have brood break and things like that, is that? How,
I don't know, but I know they make it through winter.
okay,
Well, and they go in and reproduce more than once. You know, they're, however long they do live, they're going in and out of those cells by every, once they come out of the cell with their babies, they're going back in that cell within just a couple days.
Yep.
And that's why it's so hard to catch them with the oxalic acid vapor. Cause they're just getting right back in those cells and doing it over again, and that's why they multiply so.
And that's any acid treatment. So we're jumping ahead of the slides, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Because it probably, what do they say, it takes 3 times to hear it, or learn it. The way acid works is it has to come in contact with the mite. Has to come in contact with the mite. So it doesn't matter which kind of acid you're talking about. So it doesn't matter if it's formic, doesn't matter if it's oxalic acid, either one, it has to come in contact with the mite. So if the mite's underneath the capping, it's not gonna touch it. So keep that in mind.
I know the lifespan of a mite. It says 1 to 2 months in summer and 6 to 8 months in winter.
There you go.
I thought formic acid was below the.
Yeah, formic acid will penetrate the cat.
There's
I kind of heard.
some studies that say that it does go through the capping. But you're also running formic acid for 10 days, right?
Yeah.
Depending on which dosage you're gonna go. Like if you're gonna go 2 pads and run it hot, or if you're gonna run 1 pad for twice the duration. The idea is that that acid is present throughout the brood cycle.
Yeah.
So that's the thing to keep in mind, is it's contact, right, during that time. Has to come in contact with the plant, acid treatments have to come in contact with the plant. Okay. All right, so integrated pest management, we got some farmers here, I know, so, this is, no news, hopefully, to any of you. This is for anything, this doesn't matter if it's the Japanese beetles outside your house, it doesn't matter if it's ticks on your dog. It doesn't matter if it's ticks on you, or, anything like that, so, integrated pest management, so it's, no single treatment, right? It's a stack. It's a bunch of different things to try and attack the problem, right? So, monitoring my populations on a monthly basis, 4 times a year minimum. That's pretty aggressive. I highly recommend it if you can do it. If you got hives that overwinter, you're gonna learn so much more about your bees if you do that. But, I know life happens and people don't necessarily get it done. But if you can, you're gonna learn a lot about your bees, and 4 times a year is for specific reasons, because you wanna know what you're coming out with, coming out of winter. And then you wanna know, as you're doing treatments, if your treatments are effective. So practices, there's VSH stock, screen bottom boards, removal of drone brood, things like that, things that you're physically doing into the hive. Or doing to your bees to take action to this. when needed, rotation of treatment products, that considers population and infestation dynamics. So not relying on one treatment, so not always using formic. I'll be blunt with you, I'm a big fan of formic. But I also raise queens, so if I burn up queens, it's not as big a deal to me, but. I like formic because it gets great kills. Now they say like the acid treatments, there's no, you're not gonna, the mites aren't gonna be able to. What's the word?
Become
Resistance.
Thank you, becoming resistant to it as some of the other chemical treatments. Because of the way it works, right? So the acid hits the shell of the mite and it causes it to dehydrate. It's kind of like diatomaceous earth on beetles or bugs, it slices them and then they dehydrate, same thing happens then. So, until they decide to grow a different exoskeleton or something like that, I think we're in pretty good shape of acids, but it is a good idea to rotate your treatments. And I think, running 2 different ones is a good idea, if you can. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you
This
consider,
is super casual, so just.
do you consider formic acid and oxalic acid different treatments, or do you consider them the same because they're both acids?
So when you say different treatments, you mean different effective?
No, in terms of rotation.
I'd say they would be different. Yeah, so I like formic acid at very specific times. So those of you that said that you got swarms going on right now, that's a fantastic time to use formic acid is right when that queen starts to lay, just before her eggs start to cap. Great time to hit them with oxalic acid, or even hit them twice during that period of time. I like to wait till she's laying personally because she's got a lot of stressors going against her, but when your brood is low, oxalic acid is great. It's fast and cheap, really effective, especially if you're not paying attention to the legal dosages. I think it's great stuff. Now,
You wanna dive into that just a little bit?
no, we're gonna talk about that in a little bit.
Okay.
So I am not a lawyer. Well, we're gonna talk about it in the other slide when we talk about.
Hitting that oxalic acid in that, in those hives before they're capping them means every mite in that hive is vulnerable to that oxalic acid. And so you get, that's why you're getting really good mite kills, because they're all already. You know, basically, they're on the bees or, you know, walking around, that kind of thing. They're all vulnerable to that oxalic acid when there's no cappings.
So I don't know if I answered your question there. So as far as, are they different treatments? The way you use them is very different, right? So formic's on for a period of time. So it's for a duration, where oxalic acid is only good for seconds, right? 30 seconds, I think it is, it's the effectiveness of it. Of the alcohol, but somebody Google it.
Yeah, actually.
It's only while it's in.
It does last in the hive for, I think for up to a couple days, you know,
Right.
where it's there, but you're, the formic acid, you know, like you say, is from, 10 to 14 days, depending on how you do it. But the oxalic acid is a much shorter period of time of vulnerability, unless you're using the new formic strips and they just stay in the hives.
I should have grabbed a bag of the formic, and I would have had it, that had the instructions, but we can Google it online, no worries. We can find it, formic, sorry. So I don't know if I answered.
The new oxalic acid strips, they stay in for a month.
For a long time, right? Did that answer your question?
I think the question, it answered a lot of questions. I think the question was, in terms of rotating your treatment.
You get the benefit of rotating.
So like you say you use maybe Formic Pro in the spring and then, or yeah, cause it's nice and cold out, and then in the summer, maybe, or, you know, later on in the year, use Viroxan, oxalic acid. So they're not getting used to, so they're not building resistance to one. In terms of building well, it's a moot point, because they don't really build resistance.
Chemical
The
acid, the ones they're building.
Yeah.
The apis.
That Apivar,
I always get mixed up with this one. Don't ask me about it's on the slide here. I don't memorize it. I got so many other things going on. I always Google. Cause I tend to screw it up. I know by the way they look on most of them, but, I would say always consult the Googles and look it up and read the instructions on the package. Not because it's the law, but because, they know their product better than anybody. They go into a lot of details as far as when to and when not to use them. Like, for example, what we're gonna talk about in the slide, but formic, definitely don't use it when it's 90 degrees. So you get past the first couple days, then it can be 90 degrees, but definitely don't do it when it's 90 degrees. And I forget the bottom temp, I feel like it's 45, 50 degrees.
It's 50.
Yeah, thank you. So, we can, and we'll Google, we'll look it up here. We'll go off the rails. All right, so, goal is to consistently keep levels below 5%. So if we're not doing those tests, we don't know what our infestation rate is on the hives, right? So that's why it's important to do those tests and get over the fear of that. And we're gonna do that when Jim comes and does the inspections. So even if Jim won't do it, we'll do it. And, we got plenty of hives. We can go through it, and anybody that wants to do it, we can go through and do a bunch of them. So we'll bring a bunch of shakers. We can take turns and you can rotate between people and, learn different tricks to it, all that stuff. Yeah.
Could we, when we do that, can we try something like,
We do whatever we want, man.
like on the same hive, whatever I want, an alcohol wash and then maybe a soap
Yeah.
wash and then maybe a powdered sugar wash?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I'll put you in charge of it. I'll help you, but you tell me what you want to do.
I don't know, do it off of one frame.
Let's figure out the experience.
Yeah.
And we'll do it, yeah, I know, it's good. But
So to me, one thing of doing, a thing that would be neat if you're gonna do that is to do a sugar shake.
Yeah.
And then with those same bees,
Exactly.
put them in another container and do an alcohol wash and see how many more.
Ken, you wanna tell?
Yeah, we did that experiment ourselves a couple of
I think
times.
she did, yeah, she did it more than once.
And we found that, you know, like, you might get 2 or 3 mites off of a sugar shake. And then you put the alcohol on them. And there were a whole lot more that, the designated driver's fault. And there's, you know, I say we saw maybe 13 on one.
Oh, that.
So it's significantly higher.
Yeah, it was, sugar shake just doesn't go.
I think there's a lot of variables to the sugar shake as well, cause like how dry your sugar is, right? Is it the bag that you've had for 2 years that you put in a box and stuff? Is there moisture in it? Those kinds of things, like, is it, do the bees have honey on them? Like, there's a lot of things that can make that humidity in the air can change all that up. But it doesn't beat sugar shaker or soapy water.
The other thing that we found out, is, you know, like people think, oh, I'll do the sugar shake because it doesn't kill the bees and you can put them back in the hive and that'll be fine. And, at the last, there was a Heartland Agricultural Society that would have a yearly set of sessions, whatever. And the lady that was, running the show the last year they had it, she mentioned, she says, I can't say this is an official paper yet, but she had her grad students do the sugar shake.
Where was that?
And then Heartland Agricultural Society down it was in Kentucky
HCS.
that year. And, she said that they found that they marked the sugar shake bees and they seemed to be gone from the hive within a couple of days. So basically, she was saying it appears that the sugar shake just kills them slower.
Yeah, I think if you shake them hard enough to shake the mite off, they're
That's-
gonna give them brain damage.
I think Marlis physics.
I thought so, that's relaxers or football players, yeah.
I think also they overheat a lot of times, because when you're doing these tests, it's like 80, 90 degrees out. Then you're covering them in powdered sugar and all that stuff. I hope it doesn't sound bad when I say it this way, but like you gotta sacrifice some of the bees for all the bees.
Yes.
And I don't wanna kill my bees. I definitely don't wanna kill my bees. But it's a lot more brutal deal for them to die from the mites than it is to die a third of a cup of bees. So,
And in the summertime, there's 1,000 bees a day dying, just natural.
Yeah.
1,500 bees a day dying.
I hope so, with 7,000. Right?
Well,
No, I'm kidding.
yeah, but they lay as much as they lay, however much they're laying.
Exactly.
That's how many that's gonna be dying.
Last nutrition.
And here's something else that'd be interesting, looking at the drum keeper for mites. And then on the same colony doing an alcohol wash.
Yeah, let's do it for sure. I do that every time when I pull boxes apart. And they got the drone comb in there, like right now when no matter what you do, they wanna swarm. They got all that drone comb in there when I pull boxes apart. I always go in real quick and look at that larva and see if I see mites all over it. I always do that. Sometimes I will. It's pretty rare that I'm not in a hurry, but like if I'm not in a hurry, I'll go through and pick some drone cells and have a look at them too. It's for the sake of science, go do it, look at it. You're gonna learn more about your bees. Definitely do that. So,
They ever lay in the queen cell, or is the queen hatched too quickly?
I have never seen one, but then again, I don't pull.
Like you don't break apart the queen cells.
I might pull 100 queen cells apart. I will pull them off of the cup and look at them real quick and put them back on. Sometimes to see how far developed they are in the incubator and things like that. I've never seen one on there.
I would think the life cycle, the reproduction cycle of the mites are too long.
Maybe Google that or chit chat. I'd be interested to hear. I've seen queens come out with deformed wing virus. I've seen that more times than I'd like. So that is a thing for sure. So powdered sugar, a while back, there was some theories about shaking powdered sugar across your hives. Cause it would make be like walking on marbles and the mites would fall off of the bees. I think this quote on here is from Randy Oliver, but basically says that he's found it to be ineffective, but you do it, see, it doesn't seem to hurt the bees. So if you wanna try it for results, definitely try and do it.
We kind of do it.
No, what's that? So another one is small cell comb. This was a thing a while back. Basically, it's proven that was it Daydan, AJ Root, whatever, made the cells on foundation bigger than it is, from the bees way back in the day. So that they thought they would carry more nectar and all that stuff. So they went back and tried to regress the bees, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but to get the bees back smaller to see if that would reduce things. And it didn't work. So there's there's some scientific articles and that's what they're saying here. Just go to Google Scholar. And I would say this is a really good tip for anything you want to learn about. It doesn't matter bees or not. A lot less fake news on Google Scholar, right? So go out there, have a look. That's where you can see published academic papers and those kinds of things. They have to disclose if they're sponsored or not. I personally don't necessarily have a problem with some of them that are sponsored, because that's how you pay for research, but you can make your own decisions when you pick out the stuff that you read. But there was quite a bit of research done by the Tucson Bee Lab in Arizona on the small cell component. So definitely have a look there. So ways to monitor, we already just talked about the shape. There's sticky boards. So when you have your screen bottom boards, there's that piece of political sign stuff in there, and it has a grid on there, and it has random numbers. If you buy the really good ones, it has random numbers on there to be able to do the calculations. Basically what you do is you take that board and put something sticky on it, like Vaseline, or spray some paint on there or something like that. And the mites will drop and they'll stick and kink it off. So that's a method to do that. When I was doing some stuff with Purdue University and we were getting some of their mite biter queens, that's how they did all their research. So by the power of grad students and volunteers, they would take boards, roll them with Vaseline, and they'd put them in the hives for 72 hours. They would pull those boards out, and some poor soul would sit there and pick all the mites off with tweezers and put them on slides. And they would look at the mites to see which ones had the most physical damage done to them by the bees. That was done through sticky boards. So
Damage to the mite from the bee?
correct, that's why they're called
Mite biter.
mite biter.
Oh, okay, okay.
So they would, the really good ones would look like a cheeseburger. So you would literally see a chomp out of their shell. Sometimes you'd see their legs tore off or various things. They're just aggressive. They showed aggressive tendencies towards the mites. And then what they would do is they would find the ones with that highest expression. And that's what they would graft for queens, or that's where they would collect drones and they would instrumentalize something. So I got to do that a bunch of years with them. Pupa inspection, we just talked about that. There's lots of ways to do that. So you could do it with like when I first met Boone, well, maybe a year or two after, he used to, when he would put on his gear, he'd put a toothpick in his glove. Back when he was wearing leather gloves, he would put a toothpick there so he could pull off some drones to look at them. There's lots of tricks to that. I use the corner of my hive tool.
I use my,
Your
yeah, my little.
wires, your hive needles for sure.
I.
That's a good idea.
That is a PIPA inspection when you pull out the drones. I don't know if we're giving you a general idea, cause I pulled down, I don't know, 4 or 5 drones this year out of different hives and not seen, knock on wood, one girl,
Yeah,
I've seen low numbers on mine, but I treat it hard.
yeah. It's each, you know, when you pull those frames and you've got that breakage right there, you just do that, you know. so
Yeah, I
then
got
you got-
you can pull them out and inspect them.
They should be ramping up through the season, right?
Yeah.
So you should see more.
But if we're not seeing anything now, I mean,
When did you treat?
I wouldn't,
I treated last fall was the last time, I didn't treat this spring, yeah.
Okay,
I wouldn't trust that as your only way of testing.
Yeah.
I'm a strong proponent of the shake, whether it's with alcohol or soap. I use soap. But
Now, Mike Lavasa promotes the Harbo method for evaluating the effectiveness of mite resistant queens, is that right?
well, so we both do that, yeah. So well, that's for doing stock selection.
Okay,
So that's not doing for mite inspection, but you could do that too. If you wanna do that, you wanna pull a frame of purple eye pupa or just before that. You take the frame, shake the bees off, bring it in the house, get a magnifying glass. And you pull out 300 larvae and you look inside the cell and you look for mite poop. You look for mites and you look to see if the mite is breeding. And you do that on 300.
and the purple eye pupa, I imagine would be to determine if that mite is actually a reproducing mite.
It's actually because it's easier to handle the mite. Oh, sorry, to handle the larva.
Well,
Because the younger they are, they just turn to mush when you try and pull them out.
he talked about something in regards to, you know, that some mites he looks at, you can tell that they're
They're fresh.
reproducing,
Yep, that's exactly right.
and some aren't, so I assume that was why he went for purple. But
Yeah, there's after a certain date. Well, we do that. So it's after a certain number of days. But the closer you get to purple eye pupa, the easier the larvae are to handle.
Yeah.
It's like the younger they are, they just turn mush when you pull them out with the tweezers and then you gotta go find another one
I
to
can't
fish it out.
be back and stuff that stuff out.
What's that?
Wouldn't it be great if there was like a little test tube? that
Not really.
Suck that out and.
Not really, because you wanna see the mite.
Yeah, and then you'd wash out the mite.
Well, I wanna see the mite on the larva.
Oh, actually, you used
And then I wanna see the
my
mite.
son get free.
Back to the original question,
yeah.
you know, how effective is it to check drones? You know, when we're testing typically 300 nurse bees. You need, and you're looking for more than 3 to 5 mites in 300 bees. So if you're checking drones, it's gotta be sort of similar, so
You
you
have
have
to check a lot of
for
them.
Well. okay.
300 drones.
I would say a layered approach to everything, right?
Yeah, it's,
Right.
okay, so you're looking at the drones is where they do that reproduction, and again, so there's, you know, like they said, what, five mites
Five to
in
six.
there, 5 to 6 in there, and that's where they like to go. Yes, they're on the nurse bees per se, but there may be only one you know, so in a sense.
I mean, there's a lot of things, right? So if you think about a frame, if you got a green frame, it's a different story. But like, if you think about a traditional deep frame, where are your drones laid out? Usually on the edges, right? So if those mites are coming out of the center of that frame, they're gonna try and go to the closest thing possible to get into. I don't know if that makes a difference or not. I'm kind of making this up as I go.
I think it's always a good idea to look at those frames, like
Absolutely,
Tom said, when you separate that box.
never
and put all
waste the
those
opportunity.
Opened up drone frames, take a few minutes to look at those and see,
Both
do I
sides.
see any, yeah, both sides of where you ripped them apart. And that gives you a good indication if you see 5 mites in one of those cells or something, and whatever, it's just an indicator, I wouldn't use it as your primary.
And they
test.
run.
Yeah.
When you tear them, they'll run, they'll move. So they don't just.
When they- No, I've heard, and I'm not sure how valid it is. But the reason for green frames is it is a type of cell that results in more drones.
It's the largest.
It's a larger cell.
So that you can hold the cells and freeze them. But it's also something about that, when there's a choice between drones and
They go for the pheromone.
females, they'll go for the drones, probably because of a pheromone or something.
I believe I heard that from Marla Spivak and I've heard it from some others. Marla just retired. I almost drove up there for her retirement party. She was at University of Minnesota. Go first. She ran the bee lab there
Yeah.
and came up with like the Minnesota hygienic and, her crew, her bee squad or whatever they're called, the bee girls, they're pretty much all females. They came up with the UBO testing method. So they came up with that chemical that, is used for all that stuff. So, Marla was saying that what I saw her at HAS speak about this as well, that they go to the pheromone of the drone because they get 6 mites out of the male and 5 out of a female bee, right? So, they get the extra mite for those. So if they have a preference, they're gonna go for drones. So they look for the pheromone of that larva to detect that. So for the people that are new, anybody brand new? Right, so we know that what happens is the queen goes in, cleans her antenna, and she goes in and sticks her head in and measures the cell. Then based on the size of that cell, she turns around and she lays either a fertilized or an unfertilized egg. So in those green frames, they're bigger, so they would detect that as a unfertilized and then would lay a drone in that frame.
But I think if you have a deep green frame and she lays up both sides of that with drones, depending on how big your hive is, if you've got, 3 deep bodies high, go for it. But if you're running 1 or 2 deeps, then that's an awful lot of work
Yeah.
for them to do, to make a whole bunch of drones that they don't really need, but the space is there. And then if you pull all that out and put it in the freezer, it's like weigh the investment and beat effort with the investment and. Is this?
Yeah, so we're gonna talk about the green boards in a minute.
Oh, yeah.
Weather interferes, you gain a problem.
You're gonna.
Yes, Rob?
Well, I mean, once they're drawn out, they're drawn out, there's no more energy put into it.
It's the larva.
Oh, that, yeah, them feeding all along.
So I forget how many visits it is, if it's like I feel like it's over 3,000, somewhere between 3,000 and 6,000 visits. A worker gives that larva to tend it. So you multiply that times that many, so I don't know how many drones are on a deep frame. I would guess maybe 5,000 because of the size difference somewhere in that neighborhood. But that's larvae that are drones that you're gonna throw away versus larvae that you're gonna keep and they're gonna go do your other tasks, like make more bees. or
And
So
you get all.
is it a bad idea? I don't think it's a bad idea.
They pull them out,
Just don't forget.
they pull them out,
No, but that's more work.
Well, you,
makes a nice. Pilot revenues up front.
yeah, you'll see how hygienic your bees are for sure.
Yeah.
So the last method here is alcohol or soap wash, so it's either using alcohol or water with a drop of dish soap. I don't know if there's a difference, that is one thing where I'll actually use name brand, things down for that one. So here's we go into the methods. I got the cart in front of the horse, so I told you how this works, but the important part there is typically on 24 hours is what they do for that. And you can see if you look online, there's a way that they do the mathematic average based on those random numbers that are in the squares. So you count how many mites are in each of those numbers, and then you do the equation on it. We can Google that in a minute. Yeah, so the other problem that I see with these is that you get all the trash from the hive on that board as well. So sometimes it's hard to see that it's a mite and not like a leg or something like that from a bee or some random part. And here you go, you're asking about the pupa inspection, I should have just hit the slide. Yeah, so difficult to accurately apply these estimates to the entire colony. I think it's a good idea to use as. If you destroy the larva, why not look? That's my answer. I try not to waste my bees, whenever possible, I try want to learn, but when I can. So the sugar shake roll, here we go, here's the details, so, for either the sugar shake or alcohol shake or soap, it's gonna be the same numbers, so about a half a cup, I thought it was a third cup, whatever, there's a marker on the little sampler. That's what I go by. I used to use the measuring cup, but there's a lot of ways to do this. 2 tablespoons of powdered sugar, shake or roll the jar for 1 minute, let it rest for 3 to 5 minutes, shake onto a plate. Pro tip there is to spray some water on it because it makes the powdered sugar disappear, it makes it really easy to see on the paper plate. And add additional sugar. So that's how you can do it. There's really good videos from the University of Minnesota, from her bee lab on how to do this and how to set it up. So alcohol wash, similar. So you can use rubbing alcohol. You can use windshield washer fluid, typically the winter stuff, but you don't get the same results as you will with rubbing alcohol. Randy Oliver did some research on this and found, I don't want to say it's drastic, but it was a considerable difference between the two difference, because there's I don't know what the alcohol content of the windshield washer fluid, but it's way less than rubbing alcohol. So it just wasn't as effective for various reasons. Swirl for 1 minute to kill the bees and mites, to drop, examine the mite drop, repeat the steps for all your samples. It doesn't have the soap one. So for the soap one, I just do a drop of soap in the water. So I just have a bucket in my truck when I'm doing it. Now the trick with the soap is to swirl and not shake. Because if you shake, it just turns into a big giant foamy mess, and then the mites sometimes go to the top of the foam and it's really hard to get a good count. So I just kind of swoosh instead of shaking.
In regards to your control stuff, when we got started, someone sold Sharon on the idea of those crates where you put a layer of oil in the bottom and you've got a screen bottom board and then,
Sticky boards.
well, it's not a sticky board. It's like,
Oh, beetle traps. Is it?
well, no, it's like a full-size tray that she would always put oil in the bottom of it. She said she heard it was for mite control. Dayton sells them.
I've got one and it's sold as for hive beetle.
Yeah, mine were for beetles.
But you will get some, you know, you get debris and other stuff, anything that's, it's sticky,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, well,
Some people rub Vaseline on that IPM board.
yeah,
As a
it's
way to
not
get-
an IPM board. though.
Yes, and mine is
It's a
black,
plastic tray about this
yeah,
thick.
mine's black, so it'd be real tough to count
Yeah,
them,
I
like,
don't think it was ever sold to her as something she would count. It was just a method of mind control.
I had those when I first started for hive beetles.
Yeah.
I found that I helped.
Well,
I'm sure that if mites fell into, mites were gonna get into you.
Yeah.
yeah,
So how many should you test? I kind of wish Mike was here, Lavazza, because he's just efficient. So the actuary, he kind of nerds out on this. He'll always say to me, he's like, test it again. Test it again, and you'll see just random numbers, so you'll see wildly different numbers between each test. So that would be another fun thing to do when we do this group. So apiary less than 10, sample everybody, and apiary above 10, sample collected from 8 colonies. So just kind of gives you an idea there. It kind of depends how much free time you got. I will say there's some tricks to do it fast. I think, I don't know what John's selling the tester things for. He was selling them for like $12. They were like 20, $25 from everybody else who could afford to buy a couple of them. And like what I'll do is I'll test two pallets at a time, so that's 8 hives. So by the time I finish the last of the 8, my first 4 will be ready. So I usually I'll swirl or shake and then I'll let them set. So I'll finish the first pallet and I'll start the second pallet. I let the first pallet set. So there's some tricks to do with the master. You can cycle through them a lot quicker. So some thresholds, these are common ones that are out there. You can choose where you want to be with your stuff. 2% or less, not immediate problem, monitor monthly. Plan to likely treat in September or October. 3% is the economic impact, so that's where it's worth the cost of the treatment to do this. So keep in mind, the cost of that treatment is the chemical as well as the labor to do it. For personal use, it's a little different story, but for commercial guys, everything you do costs money. So economic impact, treat after removing honey supers in August, continue to monitor. Here you go, 5%. This is bad stuff. So you have a lot of problems. So you gotta treat immediately. All right, so treatments. We got anybody want to talk about their thresholds? You guys go with different numbers?
I go with, if I see I do the Cuba and go that way. Because one of my challenges, I've seen some, what I would consider good help, people who are good at that alcohol wash, but out of the same hive, 2 very different numbers on an alcohol wash. And I'm kind of like, how can you, the accuracy of it,
I guess there's a difference between finding like 0 to 5 between 2 different tests. But finding like, if I find a sample of like 15, 20, 30 mites in a collection, I don't care if my next one shows 0. I know that I got a problem.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah,
That's just my theory on it. What this didn't talk about here is on the how to do this. I don't know, maybe it's on another slide. I'm jumping ahead, but where you take that sample is critical. So you want to be taking that sample from fresh emerging brood. So young nurse bees that are literally just emerging off of that frame. So it should be really dark colored brood that's emerging out. So you're gonna see your young, fuzzy, dusty looking bees. Those are the ones that you want for that test. And you can learn some tricks with that cup. Arthur kind of taught me this. I was never successful at it, and I think it's just that I wasn't patient or what. But the flat side of that cup, I swear to you, if you hold the frame up, you can run it down their backs and they literally pour right into the cup.
Yeah.
It's just understanding the pressure to put on the bees to get them to fall into the cup. And I just kind of shake it and get my number, put them right in the alcohol and it's done. But it's very, 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 very important that you're doing that on young nurse bees. Because if we talk about the life cycle, how many are we gonna find on the foragers? If you find high numbers on your foragers, you're screwed, right? You're definitely way high. But what we're concerned about is the ones that are coming out of the capping, right? So we wanna know what are my lowlies there. So really important. All right, so treatment methods. So here's where we're talking about the ones, this is a good picture to take here. So synthetics, you got Apivar, Apscan, Checkmite. You got essential, did I skip this slide? I did say, so essential oils, you got Apigard, Apilifivar, and then acids, you got, Max Formic Pro, oxalic acid, and Hopguard. So, breaking it up into the different kinds here. So you guys want to take a picture of the time. Good, I see the rain.
Top guard is a sticky mess that I'll never use again.
It is a handful, but it has a place. It does have a place in it.
It didn't seem to help either.
It is a stiffness. And if you figure out how to do it with a mess, I'm very interested in hearing how you did it. So treatments, you got, medicate to treat when above the thresholds, as preventive measure. I think all this is pretty self-explanatory. All right, so let's dig into the synthetics. So you got Apivar. This is a good picture on this slide here. So Apivar treatment is 42 to 56 days, up to 95% effective. I don't need to read this to you. You can see it. This is a great picture. I don't know.
So are you still going in during that 56 days and doing inspections, or are you gonna mess it up by
I don't know.
opening it up?
No, they say, no, yeah, they say you should move, at least the eighth bar, move it to wood frames. I mean,
Where's those bugs going in the specs? That's always my like, well, they say it takes 60 days, well, what am I doing during those 60 days?
Formic, I give it a week. When I
Yeah.
put them on, I don't touch it for a week. But it's pretty rare that I have a hybrid on that, that's the one, during that time. So it's like after a week, then it's very neat for me.
Mhm.
But if you kind of think about how the treatments work. You know, some of them, it's important that they have contact, right? Like Apivar, for example, you gotta, it's the whole idea is contact. Right? And, I always get them mixed up, so which one's more final?
it's guard.
The so that's fine. So, yeah,
Sorry.
right there, ta-da.
The temperature for the 50 degrees, is that day temperatures or is it night temperature too?
Nighttime.
Nine.
Night
I
temperature.
don't think it matters, right? So if for some odd reason you had colder days and warmer nights, I think it's just that you don't go below 50. And if it happens like per day, you're okay. It's just during the duration of time. You want to find it consistently across that time. Like formic, it is important in the first couple days, particularly because that's when the highest dose is used, but. All right, so here's the next one here, essential oils. So I always get this mixed up, which one's final. So since I don't trust myself.
Alright.
Well, they're both thymol according to the slide.
Well, one's got because of other stuff. I'm all camphor and menthol.
Yeah, one of these, the one that comes in the green bucket, that one has a date that they say it expires and the laboratory tested it doesn't have a different effective rate. As long as it's sealed, so.
So it has a date,
Formic has a date. That's,
is that accurate?
I think Apivar is important too on the date.
Is it okay to use formic beyond that date? I've heard it gets stronger and I've heard it gets weaker, so.
Can't see.
I think they had a Midway Quick Trip that it was a very short window of time. Where now the Formic Pro, I think their time frame is quite a longer range.
Okay.
I don't know the answer. I said safely tell you the right answer there.
So I should ask the company.
So sorry, that's why I always say, like, Google their info. They'll have all the details on there. And then you could probably research effectiveness after the date. I don't know. To me, labor is important. How much time I spend with it, and I don't wanna mess around with chemicals in the hive if they're not really gonna be effective. That's my approach to it, but
But with the thymol, you need to remove your supers.
that's a very important thing, right? Between them all, does it have it on here? It doesn't have it listed on there, so. But there you go, like Apigard, right there, you could do 105 degrees, so if you're, like, I like to treat as soon as I pull my honey supers. And it's usually hot as hell during that time, so if you're in a garden, you could use it during that time.
Now, when they say pull your honey supers,
So for the
how long? Before you put the.
Well, that's a good question. So like for the thymol, the reason why they tell you to pull your supers is because it tastes awful. It tastes awful. Like it'll ruin your honey, even just a teeny bit. That's why they tell you to pull it. It's not that it's gonna kill you. or cause you harm or something like that, it's just gonna murder your honey. So, I assume that off gases from the wax, I haven't noticed it.
Yeah, cause you put it on and, you know, I've been using that like in the fall, you know, for kind of winter, but they've got some honey in there at that time. Per se,
I've uncapped deep frames that I know had final on the next year and I didn't have a taste.
It does burn off that.
I got a pretty good sniffer too, so
you got the
I pick up pretty good things. For the acids, I'm gonna take a picture of that. You can kind of see the differences here. So formic is the percentages are important. So like those strips, I don't think they're that high a percentage. They do it because they're a longer duration. Now your temperature right there, 50 to 92 degrees. So like right now is a fantastic time for formic because you can have your honey supers on, you can run that. That works really well.
If you have honey super zone, you know, the formulation is per brood box.
That's correct. That's a good point too.
And,
This is gonna change your effectiveness.
okay, so if you've got 3 supers on, you probably want another one for.
Yep. That's a good point. I run single beeps, so for me, it's a little different than it would be for you if you run double beeps.
Well,
That is a good point.
if you run a single beak with 3 supers, so you still got
Yep, even two. It'd be different.
an issue there.
And hop guard, so the reason why Ken was saying that he was grumpy about hop guard is it's pretty much like dealing with tar. So like you get it gets all over everything, and it's on like a strip, and it's all over your gloves, and then it's all over everything you touch. You definitely want to use disposable gloves with it, it's super sticky, I think it smells pretty good. But,
I also noticed that for some reason they chew back the wax underneath the strips that you put on.
I feel that with April too.
Yeah, it does.
So sort of. They'll build it up after you get rid of
So
this.
you could damage your comb, yeah. So. I don't know if we want to go into this part of the presentation.
Well, I found an answer to PK's question.
Yeah.
The length of time is crucial because thymo needs to maintain an effective vapor concentration for at least one full brood cycle to kill the mites. Therefore, it's recommended to remove a minimum of 28 days.
There we go.
so that's 28 days from your.
So keep your supers off for 28 days.
Yeah, so that's why you can see real quick, certain treatments for certain times of year for various reasons, right? It could be because of temperature, it could be because of your supers, it could be because of your brood cycles. All that has to come into play. So you have to understand your life cycle of your bees, and you have to understand your life cycle of your mites and how those intermix here.
The other thing I've noticed is, especially with the synthetics, it seems like a lot of the sources I've seen say that 95% that they're showing on that list is the manufacturer's suggested control,
Oh, okay.
that the control is sort of slipping. It might sort of become resistant to those formulas.
With the Apivar, I don't know how many people have used it lately, but you can tell they've changed those strips.
Yeah.
Because it used to be, you had to really pull those strips to rip them things apart, and they're making them differently, because they'll pull right apart, and so hopefully they improved the delivery method with those strips to where they're more effective. I don't know, I used them, it seemed to do okay.
100%, I agree.
Yeah.
I think they even admitted that they had some manufacturing problems a couple of years ago. They had some strips that maybe didn't have good effectiveness, that kind of thing, and I think they changed their manufacturing. And part of it was the strips. To make it easier, like, it was tough, like, I can remember having to use like pliers to be able to get a hold of them, to turn them, especially with.
Well, they probably got,
Back and forth and then rip them apart.
yeah, but they probably had complaints, okay, got fixed this, you know, like the, by the way, Quick Trip had complaints.
But even the plastic seems different.
Yeah.
Like it's got a different consistency to it.
Yeah, so keep in mind, also another thing with Vapor Bar is pay attention to when you're buying it, the quantity that's in there. So you might think, oh, well, I'm just gonna go buy that 30 pack and then I'll be okay because I'm gonna use some in the spring, I'm gonna use some in the fall, and that'll work out. You gotta use it, once you open that pack, you gotta use all the strips. So there's some stuff out there that says you can put it in Ziplocs or vacuum seal it or those kinds of things. But manufacturer says that they lose effectiveness as soon as that package is open. So you wanna open that package and put them on hives immediately. So find some friends maybe to split the 30 pack to make that a better deal there. We'll talk about that in a minute. But so here the big thing with mites to really understand is why mites are a problem for your bees. So if you haven't heard Samuel Ramsey, you should go out and listen to the 3-minute thesis on mites. He talks about this in his research. It's quite fascinating. For a long time, we thought that mites are actually drinking the blood of the bees, and really what they're doing is they're eating the fat body off of the bee. And that's a problem for a couple of reasons. Number one, well, I don't know, no particular order, right? So the fat body is their nutrition. So you're talking about a bee that's coming out of their from pupa stage, coming out malnutrition right off the bat. Never a good thing. The other reason is that that fat body is how bees detox. So that's how they deal with chemical infestations and those kinds of things. So the fat body is really important. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that mites are carrying viruses and bacteria and diseases and stuff like that. So that's why this slide's in here about be mindful of that kind of stuff. So if you have a couple of yards with bees or something like that, you might want to have a different hive tool in those locations. You might want to change your gloves. So like if you're using leather gloves, it's pretty tough to have clean gloves when you move from one place to another. So just things to keep in mind there. Just practice good hygiene there. And then drift as well. So big thing, keep in mind your drones are notorious for drifting from hives. So they'll go to the first one they want to go to for whatever reason, particularly on the ends. We'll always get heavy drift. So keep that in mind. So so we talked about, we kind of skimmed over genetics. So this is kind of my jam. So the Varroa sensitive hygiene is incredibly important. So Ken was talking about the testing. So Harbo, there's Harbo and Jeff Harris, worked for the USDA, did some research down in it was in Mississippi and Louisiana, and they did quite a bit of work there, but I'll boil it down to this, is they found that they could test for Varroa sensitive hygiene. And at first they thought it was the bee actually managing Varroa inside of the larva. And there's even still two schools of thought on this, is that the bees will find that Varroa and pull the Varroa out of the hive. And then there's another school of thought where they have hygienic behavior, where they'll actually uncap the pupa, which damages the mite cycle. It doesn't stop it, but it can damage that mite cycle. There's some different schools of thought and research being done around that as well. Corey Stevens, who we had actually come in and talk, is probably the top guy in this work right now in the United States. He's kind of taken over that work from Harbo. Even Harbo kind of handed the torch over to him on there. If you want to learn about the Harbo essay on how to do that testing, you can find it on his website. You look up Harbo Labs. He's a super cool guy, him and his wife. They stopped selling their queens, which is a real bummer. So you're dependent on other people that do that testing and look for that high behavior. And what they're doing is they're finding the high rate of the Varroa sensitive hygiene and grafting from that and taking drone stock from that and doing crosses with instrumental insemination, which is what we do. So we're testing our stock for that specific thing, because you could get stock from Jason Bragg, for example. You could get stock from Corey Stevens, there's a whole bunch of different people that do this. Ladshaw, although he doesn't necessarily test from that perspective. You can get stock from all these places and it's just like us. Not all of us are basketball, football, baseball players or mathematicians, those kinds of things. We all have different things. So not every bee is gonna be awesome at this stuff, but by testing, you can build high numbers of this. This is what we do in our queen breeding program, is we want that to be passed down to the next generation. So we want our queens that we're grafting from to have really high expression of that behavior. Because the offspring is gonna have less of it, right? So you lose of the generations. So, we test it, we see it in our bees, and, we're kind of nerds about it, so even packages that I get in. I'll see packages express it sometimes, and I'll mark them, and I'll say, hey, we wanna check the stock. And sometimes we've had packages with great expression, and we might grab from it and see how it does. So it's always constantly experimenting with it, it's having a ton of hives to be able to do that, so there's a lot of work that goes into those programs. And that's why those queens are so expensive, well, actually, they're only that expensive compared, 'cause I think, some of the other places are now selling queens for 40, 45 bucks.
When you see packages expressing that, obviously you've got, in most cases with packages, you've got bees that are just thrown together from several different queens and then put together in a 3-pound package. And so to see that expression, you've got to get past the
It's coming from the queen.
life cycle of those bees
That's
that
correct.
you were sold. So to recognize the expression, what, they take 2 months?
Yeah, it takes a couple of brood cycles, so you gotta have those old bees die. And then you'll see the offspring start showing that behavior, and they may not show that behavior until they move from being nurse bees. Into the middle of their life or something like that, who knows? I don't know. when they
Okay, the
start doing that.
behavior you're seeing is them chewing open the.
They could be uncapping, so uncapping, they could be physically pulling larvae out. So sometimes you'll literally see them dragging larvae out of the hive, stuff like that, like when we've had those cold nights last week. I had hives with piles of larvae out in front of them, you guys probably did too, whether you noticed it or not.
Yeah.
That's just good genetic, good hygienic behavior inside of your hives, that's the kind of thing you wanna see. So genetics do play an important factor, it's not just because I saw those genetics, it's because it's a tool in your tool belt, right? So it's one of a stack of things that we talk about in IPM. So you could be doing oxalic acid, for example, and then you might do apivar at a certain time of year, and then you might do formic at a certain time of year. Then you have those genetics doing that. It's all playing a part in that puzzle. So keep that in mind. Questions, we just covered a lot of nerdy stuff. And I kind of breezed through some of it.
You know, okay, and I'm thinking about this one hive I saw. Sorry,
Who's overwhelmed?
oh,
I'm overwhelmed.
it did, you know, they shoot up, you know, they opened up a lot. And when I looked at the bees, I happened to see a lot of bites. I was like, "Eh." And I think burn it through and they went in, but it was like the whole hive, it's kind of like they're doing the hygienic behavior, but in a sense, there's no. They're dealing with the mites, but it's not getting rid of the mites. I wanna say.
It should be getting rid of the mites, so it's not gonna do 100%, right? So,
It's gonna slow it down. The adult might, actually, it's an adult might.
Yeah.
let's go.
Break that brood cycle and slow it down significantly.
Yeah, this hive, I called my good bad and the ugly. It was,
I'm kind
I
of,
opened it up and it was, I mean, so much the birds to shoot over, and it's like, back. And I saw all these mites, ugly,
you what yesterday?
and I kind of like, what do I do here? And I just threw out former crow, and she came running back. The queen bee
Yeah,
one, yeah.
Yeah.
It's great.
They'll get more, no, you
Why
think
did
of a
that
form
one
of
grow
pro,
last year?
and it gets rid of.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
actually, a lot of
I
times.
don't know, I just thought.
They'll pick out a bunch of brood afterwards, and then it
Yeah.
somehow just seems to want to bring it big.
Yeah, it did.
So this is really important.
Okay. You lost.
So this is, we're gonna come back. to
Good.
it.
Okay.
I don't wanna not talk about that. So, I should have this in that PowerPoint, I just haven't, cause I keep hoping somebody's gonna take over that presentation.
You're so good at it.
Randy Oliver, I think is probably one of the best researchers at this because he never says good enough. That's, I think the reason why I like Randy the most is that he's always trying to get better at it, trying to figure stuff out or trying to figure out that he'll constantly say I was wrong. I love that. I love it when he says that because he's always trying to find a better way to do it, whether it's a better way to test, whether it's a better way to treat, whether it's to get more effective treatments, to play with different methods and things like that. He's also to be perfectly clear with him, that's how he's also paying for his operation as well. But this chart here is really important. So what it's showing is, here's your growth of your colony, right? So adult bee population is this right here, that fleshy color at the top. This is total pupa. And then the red is total varroa. So what happens when you're treating here, right? So a lot of people are treating here, typically in September, October, you've missed the boat. So what's important is to treat during the winter, right? So that when you start off in the spring, when you're doing this buildup, this is when your mite buildup happens too. So your mites can't build up without your bees building up. So what they're showing is we're gonna see this here pretty quick, believe it or not. So like what, 8 weeks in that neighborhood, our highs are gonna start to come down. And some of them, they might be crashing by that time because of the raw counts, because maybe you didn't treat over here. So as this population comes down, the mites are still climbing. Very important to have that in your head. Yes, sir.
The mites are climbing, so you got the crash on like the last. You get the crash on like November, you get like to the crash. Could you ever prevent a crash? Probably not.
Oh, yeah, you prevent it, yeah, for sure. So you prevent it over here. Right? So if I reduce my varroa and get it down as near to zero as possible, it's not growing at this rate. Right? So if it's low here when my bees are climbing, I'm gonna have clean bees.
Use the soap method.
You gotta clean that bees.
Cause it's
That's
like
your,
the best.
right, Bill.
It's funny, I checked this on the Hillville site and they have that available. What's that now?
Oh, there you go, Randy's cup.
$5.
There you go. Yeah, so he had like a whole thing on how he'd use a soldering iron to fuse peanut butter jars together. That's another reason why I like Randy is he's super creative, some may say cheap. So he's always looking for ways to do that, very practical methods and nothing's a secret with Randy. So he talks, there's tons of his talks on YouTube. If you want to nerd out on bees, his nutrition, it's called Fat Bees, is a phenomenal read. It's super duper nerdy, and it's probably way more than you'll ever want to read. But it's fantastic about understanding nutrition, and there's a lot of talk that might be why a lot of the commercial guys had some of the crashes that they did this year was because of nutrition. But back to the mites, so very important to treat way left in this. So
And that's what month that is.
Yeah, that's what I wondered, like,
Yeah.
when you talk about when.
Give us a schedule.
When are you?
What month is that?
so keep in mind, so the crash here is between October and November.
That's with two treatments.
That's where this red is at. Yeah, that's another important thing. Right.
So this,
So where's your treatment at?
So really, to me, your first treatment, is whenever you treat around Thanksgiving, between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And that is gonna, because all of your mites are phoretic on the beans at that period of time because you have no brood. So if you treat with oxalic acid a couple times through that period of time, you're gonna knock those mites down in your home.
Yeah, super
And so
important.
you're good until the spring buildup, till they start doing brood in the spring.
Super important. So also keep in mind, it depends about you and your bees. If you just put packages in your hive, then it wouldn't have done you much good to treat April 1st, because you didn't have bees, right? So your draw up is right here, right? So your bees are climbing up here. So as soon as that queen's laying, you could absolutely hit them with oxalic acid and get a real good punch on those packages. I would highly recommend it. There was, I think it was Brushy Mountain, they were actually doing oxalic acid on the package. Not something I would do, but, have at it if you wanna try that. I would wait till that queen's laying. Cause there's a lot of stress going on in there, especially if you have new hardware and there's a lot of things going against those bees. So I like to make sure she's laying. I like to hit them with oxalic acid just before they're capping. So just when my larvae are getting fat, that's when I like to hit them with oxalic acid. So that's something to keep in mind when you say when, it depends, right? So if you have packages, I would say like a week after that queen's loose is when I would be hitting with oxalic acid. So probably a week after I put that package in.
So like over the winter when you're not
Yeah.
laying, is there
So.
natural drop in the mite population just because there's not new brood?
Yeah, don't let me forget, I'm gonna come back to that. So we just talked about packages. Now, if you bought a nuke, different story, right? So if you're getting. I'm gonna bite my tongue on that, and I'm gonna talk about. So what you get for a nuke could vary depending on who your nuke provider is, right? So. You might get hopefully, you should get at least a dark frame of brood, a light frame of brood, and a frame of eggs and larvae, and then a mix of the rest. So probably feed and then a mixture of other stuff. Hopefully, at a minimum, that's what you're getting. Seeing the pictures from forums and stuff like that, people are getting a lot of trash. So your results may vary. But if you get a good strong nuke, right, that has like I sent home a couple, not boosting my thing, but I sent home a couple of nukes the other day that had 4 frames of dark brood. So keep in mind what's gonna happen there. So those 4 frames of brood are gonna merge out. I might get some effective treatment if I hit them with oxalic acid. But if you got a spread of eggs, larvae, and brood, by the time you're ready to hit that with oxalic acid, everybody's undercover, right? So you're not gonna get a good kill for oxalic acid, but you might get a good treatment with something else. So it's when you treat depends on what you're treating with and what your situation is inside of your hive, to answer your question there. So now let's say you got overwinter bees. So you got overwinter bees. The right answer was you should have been treating probably here and here and here, right? So all right, so it depends what you're using and when. Right, so like my treatment method, I treat, as soon as I pull my honey supers, I'll hit them with formic acid.
Is that like August?
Yeah, I pull my honey supers in July. So like first, second, third week of July, it depends on what the weather's doing and when the bees are going in the dirt. I try and do it right before the dirt, because they're less cranky. But it also depends when I have a day off from work, stuff like that. I used to do it on the 4th of July because I had an extra day from work, but your results may vary, but I want to pull it off then because I want to treat and get that kill before my bees start to crash, before they start to come down. I want to kill those mites at that time. And then it gives me an option to do a cleanup over here too, if I want to. Or if I'm doing my primary treatment here in the fall, like this is October right here where this black dot is. So that's October. You're way too late to have done a treatment there. So doing a treatment here, mid-July, early August, at the latest, in my opinion, is when you should be doing that treatment. And then you can do what are cleanup treatments over here. As soon as your bees are broodless, you can get good, easy treatments with oxalic acid and have great results and not be real hard on the bees and not have a lot of chemicals in your hives. Versus having Aprivar on for, what is it, 21 days or something like that. I forget the duration, but we just had it on the slide. So
It's just taking a lot of things into account. There's no one answer because it depends on what life cycle your bees are in. And it depends on what treatment methods you're using. And it depends on the weather. So
It depends.
everything's in the
You say
air,
that.
right? Because remember, you're farmers now. It's
It's
too hot,
really
it's
tough.
too cold, it's too
Yeah.
dry, it's too wet.
To clarify though.
Yeah.
In July, 4th of July, you pulled your supers, you treat with Formic Pro.
Yes.
If the weather's right.
Yes, sometimes I wing it, but what I usually do is I have it on hand. And then as soon as I have a break where I'm gonna be below 85 for a couple days, is when I'll throw them on. And then if they cook and go into the 90s after that, I roll the dice. And
Most of
and I
the
do
Formic
smoke some
Pro-
queens,
Most of the Formic Pro burns off in the first 3 days.
first 3 days of the
You're
harvest.
pretty safe after that first.
Yeah. I would say 5 days if you really wanna be nutty on there. You could also do the single pad treatment to just do it for a longer duration. You gotta figure out what works for you. I'm looking for different results. I want hard and fast because I wanna make splits. So I'm gonna split those hives down, I'm gonna tear them down, and then I'm gonna throw feed on them, and I'm gonna build them up and get them to single deeps for winter. So for me, that time period is very important. And that's more important to me than the honey. For you, the honey is very important. For some people here, honey is very important. So you guys may have baseball during that time, or you may have soccer, or you may have other things, right? That get in, you may be harvesting, or you may be spraying, or you may be doing other things in your life during that time. So you have to figure out what works for you. So because I say that date, doesn't mean it's the date that has to work for you. For my program, July works really well because of what I'm doing.
You know, if you've got, just a few hives, you can do them all at the same time, but if you've got more hives, sometimes, I'm about three to four hive inspections and I'm done, but if I've got 20 hives, that's gonna take more time.
I treat everybody at the same time in the yard.
The problem I ran into, so I did the treatment, I believe it's September, 1st of September,
Way too late.
2 queens gone.
Yeah,
You couldn't give me.
that's another reason why it's too
So
late,
if I do it in July, are you gonna have queens?
usually. Yeah, hundreds of people, man, that is honest. I have hundreds of people asking.
Let it tank your own.
So, okay, so if I've got, and I also, like the 1 or 2 strip method will make a decision on how big that hive is. If I've got a big hive, I can put 2 strips in. If I've got a smaller hive, 2 strips is too much. And think about fumes,
If you run a single deep and you throw two pads on there, you're gonna smoke them,
Yeah,
right? You're gonna probably smoke a queen. But if you run like a single deep and a medium, during that time, you should be in good shape, or a double deep, you should be okay during that time. You're gonna smoke some queens, but keep in mind, that's another reason why you're rolling the dice pretty hard in September. Because let's say you even get that queen, you don't realize that queen's gone for a week. Best case scenario, right? So now you gotta get a queen, so you gotta try and find somebody that has one, or you gotta have one shipped in, or whatever the deal is. You gotta get that queen, so now you gotta get her in that hive, you gotta get her introduced, so that might be another couple days. So you might be 2 weeks until that queen starts laying. So keep in mind your dates, right? So I always say winter prep starts in July. For me, winter prep starts in July. I don't care about fall harvest. I'm gonna pull all my practice, I pull all the honey. And that's not because I want the honey. I pull that honey because it's hard on my bees. So I backfill with syrup and I'll feed pollen. That's a different subject. But for me, I want to be doing my work here so that I get strong colonies in the winter. I take my losses in the spring, not in the fall. I want strong bees going in the winter.
So how did you winter over that?
Mixed bag, actually, because I Hail Mary a lot, right? So a lot of them are hope for the best, right? And I know every year that they're gonna die because I know they're weak and I should have combined them and I regret it and I kick myself every year. But I'm like, this might be the year, they might be all right, we're gonna get a mild winter. And then it isn't. There's also, I had some moisture problems in a bunch of hives, so that wiped me out in some places. I had a lot of problems. I ran out of food in some of my colonies because I got busy with other stuff and didn't get out there and replace my sugar bricks, and my colonies were enormous. I mean, I pulled some dead outs that had clusters that big in February. Like, I've never seen that before, really. So it's just, there's a lot of reasons why those losses happen. Some of it is because of mites. I didn't get good treatments. I didn't use formic in all my yards. My yards that used formic, I had great wintering. This year,
Yeah, see,
this year.
yeah.
Next year I might get screwed,
I've been typically the formic and I do it 3 times and then that fall, as I put one on as late as I can. And, and actually I don't pull those pads off till this first spring and inspection, and I did the ApiGuard also late. And I had, okay, club hives, I got 5 out of 7, my hives, 18 out of 22, so. Pretty good.
So keep in mind that winter prep starts from frost date. So frost date's like what, second week of October?
Yeah.
So if you roll back 3 generations of bees, so 60 days, 63 days from that frost date, that puts you early August, right? So to me, mid-August is the go, no go. So I may combine from some other hives and make some stuff stronger, but if you have 1 or 2 hives, like there should be no screwing around after that point, right? Because that's not when you want to do a treatment that might be hard on a queen. You want to do it way before that, because then you have time to get a queen, get her laying, get her built up for winter.
A lot of times if you have the option to be able to treat through September, APOVAR would be what you would want to use, because it's not going to affect. It's not gonna, it's not gonna, be detrimental to your queen and then.
But you can't have supers on, right? But you can't have supers on.
You can't have supers on that.
So keep that in mind. You want fall harvest, you can't use a.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, keep in mind right now, everybody's swarming. Great time to break out those oxalic acid vaporizers, or go check the one out from the club, or borrow one from a friend, or say, hey, can you come over and help find your bee buddies here? Shake hands and say, hey, I'll come help you do yours, you come help me do mine, that kind of thing. Great time to treat them when they're swarmed out, waiting for that queen. When that queen starts laying, a week later, you want to hit them with oxalic acid and you'll get good kills on them. And it's a lot cheaper than formic. Just thoughts, right? Sorry, Rob, you're asking a question.
No, I was gonna make a comment on this chart. It's interactive and you can put it on your phone too. But for me, the standout is like in July, you might check and show two or three mites in your alcohol wash, and they just grow exponentially. And you can plug in the numbers and adjust
These treat dates.
Yeah, you can adjust, you can plug in your treat dates, the efficacy of the treatment, and also for your starting numbers, I forget, I'd have to read it again, but you make an adjustment to get the starting mite count. I think you adjust the starting mite count to get your alcohol wash numbers to match up, so it makes sense, and you can plan ahead what kind of. You can plan ahead for, oh, well, I think I'm gonna, based on what I'm seeing now in May, what I'm gonna need to do in September, and like Tom was saying, like the temperature in September, or pardon me, August is risky.
You might have to pivot. You might think you're gonna use this treatment and you're like, well, not anymore. You might have to change. So I wanna make sure we have enough time. Can you show off your setup you got there?
So basically, people are gonna bring, oxalic acid treatment. So what this one here is, this is the Rob bees. And it's the compact, one, and it's cheaper because it doesn't have fancy display and all that stuff, and it's got a light on it that, once you put the battery in there, it starts to heat up. And you go by the flashing light. Now she's got the bigger model, it's got the handle and got the readout on it. they're battery powered, and then you've got the older types that are, run by 110. Which is the same thing that she's got, other than it's going by 110 power instead of the battery power. The battery power is very convenient, it's nice. That and these newer ones, they've got a much heavier nozzle. And so you don't have to worry, so much about, bending the pipe thing there. And so, but that's basically.
So how do you use it? Walk through how you use it.
So basically, you're gonna take the battery and you're just gonna push the battery in. And then it's gonna begin to flash. Yeah. And so it's gonna start heating up. And, in here, these have, it's like a little plunger device. And, you can adjust it for how much acid that you're gonna put in there, which I just run on wide open. As much as I can, and then you're basically, I use a container like this and I just, you just. Hit it with that and it'll pack it in there. You want to pack it in there as tight as you can. And then once, I put, holes in the back of my hive. I'll drill a small hole, for this in the back of my hive, and I'll set up a block up there or something. I actually got it just sitting up there. And it sits up there pretty nice, and then whenever the lights, going just right, you can put it in there and you just pop it down. Oxalic acid goes in and starts treating.
So it vaporizes it at that little tube in front that's pushed into your hive.
Yeah.
And then you have the bottom shut off, your bottom boarded.
I always do solid bottom ones.
Okay.
I don't use, but yeah, you would have to, if you've got screen bottom boards, you wanna put your insert in there.
Then what
Little
about the
plastic
entrance?
cup.
Yeah, entrance.
And then, yeah, and then also you gotta close off the entrance or, like
So what do
in
you
the
got?
fall, I'll have an upper entrance and so I have to tape it off too.
You put a white towel across.
I usually just use, blue painter's tape. It's pretty easy to do that, but, another thing that I've used a couple of times that, they've got the microfiber claws, they seem to work really well. I don't know why it just seems better, but you get it nice and wet, you just stuff it in the entrance, but in the wet, if you're gonna do it in November, you're already gonna have your, entrance reducers. And so that's the reason why I just use the painter's tape and I just put painter's tape over the little holes in front of my entrance reducers.
And how long do you leave that tape on?
20 minutes afterwards.
Is that hot enough to damage a plastic hive?
Yes,
So what modifications do you have to make?
they have. I'm not sure what you do, because I even had, one bottom board that was made out of that rigid, that hard plastic that I got it from, Hilco. And I gotta be really careful because it'll melt that plastic real fast too, because you're talking about 400 degrees. It's over 400 degrees, this pot's over 400 degrees when you start the freaking.
How long does it take to do
They
the?
sell a tip.
Okay,
It's the tip that goes on the end of the nozzle.
so it's.
For April, it's labeled for April bars, but I can't imagine, it's labeled for. But I can't imagine it wouldn't work for any platform.
What that cost? Now, one thing that I've done too, at times especially with the other one that I have. Is I actually get a piece of 3/8 inch, copper, and I put it on there to extend my nozzle. And I found that to be effective, in some cases, and I suppose if you had the, some of the plastic equipment, if you use that longer nozzle, it would keep all the heat from this pot away from your plastics too. That would probably help.
And you said you drilled a hole in the back of your pipe, just you put it at the bottom, the middle, the top.
I put it, it depends on how big my bottom board is. Sometimes I drill it into the bottom board, but you can drill it into your box too. It's not gonna really hurt. And then you just kind of mark it, and then whenever I come in to do the treatment, I come in with my drill and my bit, and I just punch that drill through the bit, because they'll propolis it up or debris will get in there, and so you gotta make sure that thing's open, or you're gonna have all that oxalic acid coming back at you. And, I myself, whenever I treat a hive, this is supposed to be 4 grams of oxalic acid. I know it's not kosher, it's not legal, but I treat it twice. I hit them twice. You cannot hit them with you can't hit them with oxalic acid too much that it'll hurt them. It's not gonna hurt the bees to do that. It's just the way the law is, and they're reforming the law, from what I understand, to up that number some, but they're never gonna get to 8 in 2 brood chambers, but that's what I treat.
So James, with that method, instead of using like the cup and putting it in there, do you need to mask it up and everything?
Yeah, I
You
do.
still do?
Yeah, I still mask up, and whenever it's cold, it's easy, but one of the cool things about this method is if you've got that thing sitting there. And you've got it sitting there on a thing, on something, and you put that in, and you pump that, you can walk away. So you can literally, if you find it really hard to, I do not recommend not using it, because boy, you get some of that in your lungs, it does not.
You'll make a mistake.
Ask me how I know. But it, I've done that, like at home, I've got a second floor deck that I've got a couple of hives on. And I'll take it, and I'll do that, and then I'll just walk out, and I'll walk through the screen door, and I'll watch it. And then whenever I'll stop seeing it, whenever my light changes and my heats come back up, I can come out and I can pull it out, and I don't have to worry about enough of that to be there to be a problem.
And
And then
you
I
do
just
the
put my other one in and hit it, huh?
You do the second one right after.
I did the second one right after. While everything's, taped up and gone, and that way you're filling the chamber of that thing. More full of the oxalic acid.
So does that hold 2?
No, this holds 4, this
Okay,
thing
so you
holds,
did it with
4,
8?
and so, yeah, I'm doing 8. And I bought an extra one, so I've got 2 to treat with.
How much
So I'm
would you
hitting a
use?
double brood chamber with 8.
Why are they not changing the number? Okay, so why are they concerned with the amount?
I think it's it's government, that government's always, God knows how far behind, but if you watch some of them, they're saying, 3 to 4 is really what's affected. Instead of 2, 1 or 2, 3 or 4 is what's really affected.
There's a really good talk with, it's like Bob Binney, who else was in that?
Someone from Florida, isn't it?
I think it was, the guy, goodness, his name's on the tip of my tongue. And, there was 3 different researchers that came in, matter of fact, I think it was 2 talks, because it was so
Yeah,
long.
it was a 2-part,
And
yeah.
it might have been 3. It was,
I can pass that
the
one.
lady from UGA. She was on that too.
That's one.
Gosh, her name. Anyways, the 3 of them were on there, and they kind of nerded out on it. Went through, so it was Bob as a commercial guy, and then 2 researchers, professors, talking about what they found in the research in Florida and Georgia, from the Jennifer Berry was the one from UGA. And then I can't think of there was a younger guy from Florida, but well worth your time to watch. So you guys were asking how much these things cost. This is that one brand. There's a bunch of these on the market.
Is that the Laurel?
That's the Laurel, yeah.
Isn't it?
Should be that much.
Isn't that yesterday for that Laura?
Yeah, yes, it is.
Yeah, I think that's the Laurel.
Yeah, it's the Vapor, and that one is the light, I think it's the light or mini, whichever one.
That's this one right here is the one that James just showed you.
And you're set.
Shameless plug, I'm gonna have my house.
Well, just like, save that much, in the course.
Anybody wants-
Yeah.
Okay, so
Thirty
then.
in that.
How much would you use on?
And then,
Yeah.
because.
How much would you use on?
What's that?
Do you know much about that? I gotta eat.
Yeah, we'll talk about that as well.
So, not every 4 days, but.
So he's just asking about the approach of a regular interval with oxalic acid to be able to deal with that constant brood emerging. So, there's some talks, some researchers have done. I think, Kate Reynolds had one about that, where he did like 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, maybe 5 days. On there, I think he found a sweet, I think his sweet spot was 2 days, right?
2 days, yeah, 2 days, you're gonna have a pretty good kill, but, they're getting back in those, back into the self-free.
So, so his verdict, you recall, was every 2 days for what period?
Well, you would have to have it through, you'd have to have it through at least,
Full cycle.
what is it? From day 8 to day 21. But they showed some impact on 24. So five treatments, 5 or 6 treatments, we got a couple of.
Well, they did show impact on the bees doing that treatment. All that, so, it stressed the bees pretty hard. So, it's using the right things at the right time. I mean, hopefully you're hearing me say this over and over and over, is that when the bees go broodless, this oxalic acid is the easiest, cheapest possible mite treatment you can come to. Super easy, super fast, not a lot of work, and with the battery pack ones, it makes it so easy.
There are those DeWalt batteries.
Yeah,
They come in all
you
different
can get them, Milwaukee, Rigid is the other one.
Wait, boss.
And then-
Right here.
The Tobo, the Bosch, Ikea, well, I bought mine right before they released the rigid.
Oh, too bad. I bet you they could,
I went to Milwaukee.
I bet you that way would. I bet they could change out the.
So you.
I don't know who now, but.
I like her, you can.
But like, there's big batteries, the 8 amp hour battery. I don't know that, but I did 30, I did 30. And, with. It's an 8 amp battery.
Yeah. Oh, wait, you have.
Right, we got like these conversations going on right now. We sort of wrap some of the stuff back around.
So, you have to clean it out. Okay,
Yes. I wanna hear about that.
we're gonna talk about cleanup.
Okay, so the other thing with this one specifically is, you're gonna get some, it's not water, it's distilled water. You're gonna put some in this container, you're gonna let it come up to temperature, you're gonna pop it on the top. And then you gotta flip it on, you gotta hold that thing on. Or it'll just pop right off because of, cause that's gonna, it's gonna steam instantly whenever it hits that 400 degrees. So you gotta hold that on, and it'll shoot it out and it cleans it out really easy.
Well, that will already gotten burnt with 400-degree stuff, water.
I haven't yet.
Okay.
When you're done.
Not yet, you just, the first time it popped off and made a bit of a mess, and then I knew I had to hold it on there good. And keep good pressure on it, so it wouldn't pop off, it was always so.
I want the new pool.
So right now, real quick, we'll talk about your bees. You should be going through your hives right now and making sure you're not honey bound. Because I guarantee your hives are honey bound right now. I put money on it. So unless they're brand new bees, and even some brand new bees, like I saw some people at Nukes that are already honey bound. I just put them in like a week or two ago. So get in there in your brood chamber, pull those deep frames of honey out, get it out of that brood chamber, move them up above an excluder or something like that. Make sure she has room to lay. This is a great time to throw new frames in between that brood club. Now that it's 50 degrees at night, or coming up this week now, where you're over 50 degrees at night, you can break that brood cluster and put a new frame in there. Give them work to do, because if you don't, they're gonna be in the tree. They're gonna be in the tree.
Yeah, you get them to build out the cones, that's, I've done that, but they don't like to build the cones out.
Is it raised by the wax?
Yeah, they have. Probably easier at
Well, boy wonder. Sharon had to feel wax sprayed.
Like a crayon.
You like a paint roller and melt it.
Sometimes.
They have the wax, like I got them from Hilco, so they have like a wax.
You got the triple wax.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the triple wax.
Oh, you don't have it anymore?
I wish he
said you
did.
have the triple wax, he said you have.
He just has double.
Yeah, if they're gonna take it to it, yeah.
Oh, he did have it.
Thank you. Right, Steve?
That makes sense.
I said if they're not taking to it, get more wax on the frames.
It also depends on what's going on by you.
Yeah.
So like, if you don't have a nectar flow, they're not gonna draw. I'd be shocked that you don't have a nectar flow, because you probably got lots of honeysuckle, you probably had lots of.
Loaded, but it's just loaded, but.
Phone's gone, my stuff is
So
going.
here's the other part, so make sure that they're not honey bound. And then people ask, do I need to feed? So I've mentioned this a couple of times, make sure this is just saying it again. If your young larvae are dry, they're starving. If your young larvae are wet, they don't need to be fed.
The other thing about feeding, at least Benny says that if you're feeding your bees, well, all of a sudden they stop taking the feed. That means they've got nectar and they'll ignore feed over nectar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So why does one of my hives ignore the feed and the other one doesn't? Right
So,
next to each other.
It could be worker force, so think about your numbers, right? So that's why young bees are so important. So a lot of people, they'll ping me and say, hey, I need a new queen. And I probably talk more people out of buying a queen than people that buy queens, because I hate to see them slaughtered, but that's a different story. But the big deal is to have those young larvae, because they're the ones that are doing the work. They're the ones that are doing the care and feeding of the larvae. They're the ones drawing wax. They're the ones doing all the work. Now, that said, if you only have young bees, you don't have much for foragers. So if you're in a growth stage, sometimes feed is the right way. So just make sure that you're not plugging up with feed, because that'll happen too. So you got, there's no exception for going through your bees. Like this time of year, it really doesn't hurt to go through once a week. You should definitely be in there every other week, maximum. Like it shouldn't take you too long, but get in there. If you're brand new, take your time, go through it. But like, know what's going on inside your hive. Show me a video and I'm not picking on you, but show me a video and say, does this look like orientation plates? I'll never say yes. Because a lot of times you may think it's orientation and swarms. People, I see it on Facebook all the time. Are they swarming? Are they swarming? And they'll say, no, they're washboarding, they're this, they're doing this, they're doing that. The only way you know is to get inside your hive and look at those frames and see if you got queen cells. That's the only way you know. Don't trust somebody on Facebook telling you, no, you're good. Because next thing you know, your bees are in the tree. And you're wasting your bees. So now you just lost your honey production, you lost your bee production, all that stuff. And you pissed off your neighbors.
Or my husband who was,
That too.
the bees were raining down on him when he missed the branch going into the house. We're still married.
All right,
Easier.
we got some good nerds in here with this, mite testing type stuff, so have you guys looked at any of the newer things going on, like RNAi or thermal solar hives or
What language are you?
pathogenic or pathogenic fungi?
Mushrooms.
So the fungi are supposed to be natural,
Oh, the mushroom?
Yeah, this type of mushroom.
yeah.
They-
Yeah, they kill the mites. The RNA interference, they've been studying that, and you can feed that to the bees.
What
and
is
the
that?
mites. RNA.
Yeah.
That's like. A double helix of a DNA, or the other way
Okay,
around.
so.
Yes.
Ribosome.
Right, so you
Yeah,
can
right,
feed
okay.
that to the bees, and then that infects the mites,
To the.
and you need to get it, but you can put it in sugar water. Feed it to the bees.
What's promising about it is that it is the viral, it's supposed to help with viral infections. We'll see,
Okay,
we'll see what happens.
so it's that, you're actually feeding it to the queen, right? Isn't it the queen that you're inoculating?
I don't know if that's the RNA or not. I think RNA is one that's fed through syrup, I don't know.
I had heard it was through the syrup, or I had
Is it?
read it was through the syrup.
That's apparently something.
I'm not an expert.
And so then, the mites get it when they, feed on the bees.
So the thing that you're talking about, James, is the queen, the AFB treatment.
The vaccine.
That also shows some promise for viral infections.
Wasn't the vaccine more for, AFB?
AFB, yeah, that's what I was just saying.
Yeah, yeah, but it's also effective on the virus that the mites put out.
It showed a lot of success on viral infections.
Okay.
So real quick, last thing about, I'm sorry, Tom, I'm not trying to ignore what you said, but we brought this up in the board meeting. We just wanted to see what kind of interest there is on this. So we were talking about if there is interest from the club to do a group purchase for Foreman Pro. Is there anybody that'd be interested in that? Okay, so it looks like there's pretty good interest on that. So like if we put something out there, either in an email or in Facebook or something like that. If you were to commit to it,
I think we need to know how, like if they're getting one.
that's what we'll need to
versus-
know. We'll need to know if you're committing to it, like how many you need for what you're purchasing, because like the bulk pack is 30 packs, and like most people don't need 30 packs, so. That's what we're trying to figure out, is how many of those packs we buy to be able to fulfill everybody's needs here. We're not trying to make
So
money.
it's, we're just, okay, the price that, a standard price for the 30 pack. We figured out it was.
5 by 30.
Yeah,
So we'll say
so-
whatever it is plus that.
Yeah,
Right.
and that, so whatever that.
You figured it was about
We're buying it as the 30 pack, but can split it up at the cost of the 30 pack, which is.
Way cheaper than.
It's a pretty big cost savings from like the 2 pack and I think the 10 packs, whatever the smaller ones are, so. We'll put something out there and gauge interest, but what we would have, we're shooting for having it at the bee inspections. And then we could have it at Bees and Brews if you can't make that. Would those pickups work for people that were interested?
Or even the next meeting too. 'Cause you
Or the
guys
next
used to come
meeting.
and
So one of those 3 would work for everybody? Is there anybody that those 3 would not work for, that's interested in this? Okay, good. So we'll get something out to figure out how many and from who. And then we'll get this figured out and have it at Bees and Brews.
Yes, Gordon.
You talked about finding your honey bound brood frames. I've got 3 hives, I don't want 4 hives, I don't want 5 hives, I want 3. Can I find those honey bound frames, put empty frames in there and knock the bees off of the honey bound? And,
Harvest honey,
what's that?
harvest honey.
You could extract, so there's a lot of things you can do, so like let's not talk about what I do, so what you would probably do is, you would probably put it in a box, you could shake the bees off. If you know where your queen is and you know that she's not on that frame, it doesn't matter, don't need to take the bees off. Put it above an excluder in another box, above your brood nest, right? So just move them out of the brood nest, put new frames in the cluster, not on the edges, in the cluster. And they will draw those and fill those, and then when you're ready to pull honey, those frames will be above your excluder, won't have any brood or larva, because they're probably a mix of brood and larva down below. But they'll emerge out and they'll backfill all that with honey, and then you can extract it when you're ready to do the rest of your honey.
So you're gonna have 3, they're just gonna get bigger.
Okay,
How's that?
and
Is that
that'll
a
keep them,
good way of saying it?
that'll keep them from swarming.
That'll help a lot.
They'll-
It'll help, that's why a lot of,
Don't read the rules.
9 times out of 10, that's why you're swarming right now.
But what's to guarantee that's not honey from your feeding in the spring?
There isn't, you know, only you know.
Okay.
And,
I'm not
and my philosophy is,
It's your
even though you spend in the spring, what's changing it from sugar, what's changing it from nectar is the enzyme, so it is, to me, still turning it into honey.
Yeah.
You bring up a good point, and you have to figure that out, right?
They say that sucrose, is sugar, just white sugar. And nectar, the only real difference between those two is, well, what do you call it? I'm sorry, I have a brain.
Fructose or?
No, the sugars are exactly the same. The only difference is just the other stuff that's,
Oh, the pollens and the,
well, I suppose you're not gonna get any.
whatever,
from it.
whatever you get as far as,
Yeah.
flavor.
Yeah,
Because
yes,
if you
okay,
put,
that's what's, yeah, because this,
Put honey-
this word I can't think of is basically the different flavors that you're gonna get.
if you put honey that was harvested in the spring and another jar of honey that's harvested in summer
Uh-huh.
and honey that's harvested in fall, you're gonna get distinct different tastes. It's the nectar profile of the source nectar that affects you. So, some people have experimented with buckwheat. And buckwheat honey's
Strong.
rather strong tasting. Goldenrod honey is a stronger taste. Spring honey, I put a picture up on my Facebook page. Spring honey is so light, it's almost clear. So,
Minerals as well.
Yeah, so Ken, I don't think you should worry whether you had fed in the spring, because it's the enzymes that is what's
well,
changing
yeah,
into that.
and
It
most of it is what's come from.
may have a little more bland taste, bland taste.
I would from the
Northern
piece
Shores.
taste.
But it's,
May I offer a solution?
Huh?
If you're concerned, just take the honey bound frame and we'll pick it out somewhere and the bees will clean it up.
Yeah.
Everybody's bees, right? Sure.
Yeah, when you're talking about how much honey you're gonna harvest out of that hive, the percentage of that's gonna be quite low.
Yeah, right.
True. Unless you're. Yeah,
So,
there was one person that I know of, they were feeding their bees way into. Way into like May and June and asking them, when do I quit feeding them? And so half of their honey was sugar syrup and so that,
But
that I
again,
wouldn't call honey, but if there's a little bit, that's.
Yeah, and they're mixing it together, they're not.
You should know.
Yes, it's mixing it, what they are getting out there and what they're
Use
not.
your
getting there. So,
Measure with your own.
yeah, don't worry,
Okay,
you're good,
I'll just use it for hot honey.
okay.
But now, don't call it my red hots. Call it.
All right. Is this how the
Good, Dan.
cheers work? Oh, yeah, we don't have to go with that.
There's a-